Hello, Facebook family and friends. How are you today? This is Moss from Investor Partner Group. We are live today at Live at 5 with Moss. And this is a weekly session for Live at 5 on Fridays that I've just recently started. And this is a very sort of open session. So I wanted to use this as an opportunity to connect with the users and see as to if there are any questions, any concerns, any comments that people need to, talk about or have a conversation about. We are going to talk about two really important topics today. One is more in relation to the states, as to which states provide better opportunities, and we will be discussing Adelaide today as to why do I think Adelaide provides a better opportunity right now at this stage. And we'll be going through some live examples, and I'll be, discussing the whole state with you, showing some live examples. The other thing that a lot of people have been talking about is Apra tightening the lending and the impacts on property market. So that's an interesting one as well. And that is something that we definitely need to talk about. So let's see how many people we have here today. Please drop it into the comments, say hello, say hi, introduce yourself, where you are joining in from, and we can get the session going. If you have any questions, feel free to stop me and ask me any questions. Let's start off with EPRA tightening the lending. Okay, so I'll keep the interesting topic for the end so that I can let more users join in. EPRA tightening the lending. So it's the talk of the town, and something similar happened in 2018 or 17, 18, and a lot of that is repeating right now. So 2.5% to 3%, and everyone is talking about it. So what does that really mean? Well, it's not a massive impact, when you look at it in bigger scheme of things, because there is wage growth that is happening at the other end. So there is some decent amount of blue collar jobs, and the employment hotness that is happening in the market. So we need to consider some of these things on a macro level as to what does that really mean. Now, APRA, this is not the first time APRA has done it. APRA has done this before in 2017, 18, and we are going to talk about some of those impacts that happened there and what we can, assume that, you would see some similar impacts there as well. So the second thing that we need to understand is that the tightening of the lending criteria, or the rise in interest rates. Right now, the type of macro environment that we are in, the government is in a lot of debt. When you talk about state government, you talk about federal government, and the interest rate rise means that higher capital repayments for the government as well. So it's in their self interest, not to let some of that happen. Now, there's a massive disconnect that is happening between the federal government and the state government. So you can see that at one end, our treasurer or the federal treasurer talks about, well, the market is too hot and let's tighten it out. But you see at the other end that state is struggling. So the states have delivered millions of dollars in COVID grants and all of that. So in order to recoup some of this money, well, they have to either get it through stamp duty, or they have to basically get more cash flow going. So of course you would see some of those impacts about, well, Victoria offering $200,000 or 25% state grants, or stamp duty concessions, or abolishing the stamp duty to get better cash flows. So it's important to get that sort of understanding going as well, that although federal is at one level, there is always a disconnect, or there is right now a massive disconnect between federal and state. Also, let's not forget that this is an election year, so the government is trying to keep it simple. So they, in order to win it, they have to please the masses. It's also very, very important to get a bit of an understanding around the immigrations. So there's a lot of talk about immigration being opening up, or the borders being opening up. That would have a massive impact on the property market. And the last but not the least, when it comes to the job market, now more than 30% of the jobs are directly or indirectly linked to the property market. And let's look at some of these things. Like builders, brickies, chippies, sparkies, real estate agents, handyman, tilers, kitchen makers, all of these people, developers, sales staff, architects, consultants, all of them are linked to basically the market. So it's quite important, and it's quite the key that we understand all of these dynamics before we understand, Apra tightening the lending. So does that mean that when Apra is tightening the lending, they would basically be stopping the market? No, the market is going to, yes, relax a bit, but it's not going to basically disappear. It's going to slow down, but it's definitely not going to relax. I'm going to take a pause. I'm just going to have a bit of a drink and let more people join in, and get some of the conversation going. Okay, I was a bit odd, but that's okay. Any comments so far? I can't see any comments coming up. We still have about 14 minutes to go. So I'm going to jump in directly into Adelaide. So let's talk about South Australia, and why do I think, South Australia is a great opportunity at this stage compared to some of the other states. Queensland has delivered some recent, growth as well in some parts of, Brisbane. Melbourne has done significantly well. Sydney has done amazingly well. Let's look at Adelaide, and what has Adelaide yet to offer. So let's look at Adelaide in general, in totality. Okay, this is what Adelaide looks like right now. People who haven't visited Adelaide, it would be good to get a bit of an understanding as to what the dynamics are of Adelaide. So this is the northeast of Adelaide. This is the Bay Area. A lot of really good suburbs in the Bay Area right now. This is the coastal line that Adelaide travels to, and this is the southeast. Now, if you look at it, Adelaide in principle, within the 25-kilometer radius, all of this would be almost pre-developed. And what I tend to say is what's happening, especially in Adelaide right now, is not a real growth. It's a price correction. Okay, so Adelaide has always delivered some decent rental returns, and it's important to understand the dynamics before we go into too much detail. So great rental returns, cheap property. It's a price correction that is basically happening in Adelaide, which basically means that prices are adjusting to the levels like any other state, because of course it's expensive to rent, cheaper to buy, so people are just adjusting prices so that it makes sense. Now, what is interesting about Adelaide is this, yeah. So when you see Adelaide in 25-kilometer radius, now not all of Adelaide is good. Of course, there is a lot of gentrification that needs to happen in Adelaide. But if you look at this radius, a lot of this is basically pre-developed. So you can't do much with any of this. So when I say you can't do much, as in you can't. The government has to develop this. All of the streets are there. The infrastructure is there, which basically means that in order to create or match to the demand or the rental demand that is happening right now, they have to basically allow more affordable housing to come in place. It's very, very important to understand these dynamics, which basically means that the pro development regime of the government, where the government is allowing more developments to happen, is majority of that is basically because of the reason is that you can't do much. It's not like Melbourne, it's not like Sydney, where there is paddocks and paddocks of land. Now people might question and say, oh, you can see all this green area and this is all this land that is available here. Well, it's not truly the land. If you look at Adelaide in the truest form, okay, and I'm just going to turn up my map so that we can see as to what I'm looking at and what you're looking at. You can see all these development that has happened, or established suburbs that are happened. But if you go to the other side, like all of this cannot be really developed. You cannot touch any of this right now. The government would potentially would not allow any of this to be developed. It's almost like indevelopable at this stage. So what is happening is that the focus is within the 25 to 30-kilometer radius, which basically means that the prices or the price correction that is happening here is because of a lot of developers developing this. The government is very pro in bringing more developments into the area, but also that there is nothing to rent. There is not enough houses, and there are more people looking. So there is a massive disconnect between demand and supply. There is massive demand, and the supply is really, really low in some of these areas. Now, let's look at it from a job creation perspective. So what does it mean by job creation perspective? So in Adelaide, there's potentially like 5 or 6 things that has happened at the same time right now that people really do not understand. So let's talk about some of those things. So Mawson Lakes is one of the areas or close around where there is a massive federal contract that's going right now. The government is similar to Victoria, has pledged about $30 million in infrastructure lending to develop Adelaide more. And then there is massive submarine contract that has come into place. But the interesting thing is this, when you talk about South Australia and the foreign investment that is coming in South Australia, it's just amazing. You see Tesla coming in there. You see Microsoft Azure Space Team coming in there. They're almost, creating this digital space in Adelaide right now, where there is, digital health innovation fund that is started off there. There is startups like Fleet Space, InnoverTech, Southern Launch. They're doing this massive building infrastructures for Aussie space in there. So you would see that, it's the talk of the town when it comes to innovation. It's almost like a small Silicon Valley that they're trying to create out of Adelaide. And then, some of the professional jobs like, Deloitte starting its innovation and technology center, there is massive job creation that is happening there together with the development that is happening at the same time. So it's interesting to see the dynamics on the screen, and make a judgment call as to, okay, why is there a true price correction or a true growth that is happening in the area? You would see some of these areas have seen immense growth. Like, if you talk about northeast of Adelaide, when we started buying there, we were buying in low 4s, and right now it's in high 6s or mid 6s. You go to southeast, and when we started buying there, they were in low 3s or high 2s, and they have now hit around high 4s or mid or early 5s, even to that extent. So it's a beautiful coastal line, but there is a lot of gentrification that needs to definitely happen. So just because all of the Adelaide is a prime and a growth because of the sellers market, that does not mean that you can go out and buy anywhere. Of course, out of all these suburbs that you're looking at, me personally, I'm only looking at 30 or 35 maximum suburbs that we are looking at, and we're calling it growth corridors, and we're doing active buying in there. Now, I'll wait for some of the comments to come through. I haven't seen any of these comments to come through. My time is about to hit up. There's about 2 minutes left to finish off the conversation. If there is anything that anyone wants to ask in specific about property investing, property development, tax, SMSF advisory, happy to help them and guide them in order to help them with their property acquisition strategy or property investment strategy. So yeah, I'll again take a pause here and see if there is anyone who is keen to ask any question before I jump off. I can see a lot of people joining in. There's about 12 people watching this right now. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the kind compliments. Really appreciate it. Price, yeah. So that's an amazing question. Thank you for asking that. Price point differences between Brisbane and Adelaide. So, amazing question. It depends on where you're buying. Look, the pockets in Adelaide, especially if you look at, okay, let's talk about Adelaide pockets first, and then we'll jump onto Brisbane. Brisbane is my next week's topic, so I'm going to do a comparison between the two, and I'll let the users decide as to which one is better right now. But let's look at the price comparisons in the pockets. Yeah, so this is the most expensive part of Adelaide right now. You're looking at a price point of, well in the 800s. If you look at the Bay Area at the top here, you're looking at the price point between 400 to 500, depending on what you're trying to buy. You can buy potentially under 300 here as well, depending on what type of house. We have done a recent acquisition there at about $340,000 for a beautiful house, rented at $350 per week, and the brand new houses are selling at about $750,000 there in the area. If you look at somewhere in the top here, you're looking at a price guide of between, I would say, 500 to 550, especially the three things that I've talked about in my last video: growth corridor, value add, and positive cash flow. So that's the price point that you're looking at. People have moved further down towards Elizabeth and Angleview and Evanston as well, but I tend to stay away from some of these areas. I tend to come in closer. We tend to stop at Salisbury and around, and not go any further down there. A lot of should I say, east of Adelaide is hills area. I would always counsel people to stay away from them. You can't do much with the land, especially in the hill zone. There's a lot of blockages, or the council is not pro towards the development. If you come towards southeast, if you're closer to the beach, as close to the beach as possible, then you're looking at a price point. We have just acquired a property somewhere around here at around 540. You would see that being posted. Again, the rental is quite strong in the area. That is a subdivision potential land, 1 into 2. And then further down, if you're looking at Morfordwell, Nollonga, Seaford, some of these great areas to buy, and the price point is somewhere between 400 plus, in some of these areas as well. So again, very different price point, but a lot of this is still within 25-kilometer radius of CBD. So entry and exit to Adelaide GPO is quite easy. Brisbane, on the other hand, is very spread out. People tend to go all the way up to Logan, at the bottom end, and at the top end you would see Moreton Bay Council. So you are looking at the price points of 300s. Now you can find 300 price point in Adelaide as well. That's not the case. You can focus around Salisbury area and find price points around 300,000 as well, or Teparu area and find some price points there as well. Brisbane is very, very tricky. You have to be very known to the suburb to buy in a particular area. You can't go towards Logan. I've made numerous comments about Logan and the Ipswich Council and why should people stay away from some of these areas, and we'll talk a bit more into the detail about some of these things and how much land supply is available when you talk about Brisbane in specific, and how this talk of the town about Olympics coming in and comparing it to Commonwealth Games in Melbourne in 2005, and what impacts did we see then, and what impacts can we assume in the Brisbane market then when the Olympics come in. Mind you that Olympics come in for only 7 days, so all this hype about 7 days where there's a massive growth coming is quite interesting, and we'll open some of that can of worms and talk about some of those things as well. We are going to stop here. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for listening. Enjoy your weekend. Stay safe, guys. Have a really, really good weekend. It is wet and cold in Melbourne on Sunday, but hopefully wherever you are joining from, stay safe. Stay close to the family. Enjoy the time off, and adios.